So firstly, education. This is a huge area of application for spiral dynamics. And I put it as the first on my list because in some sense, it's perhaps the most important. It's one of those high leverage points that we have in society. If we transform our education system, and if we get our education system right, both at the elementary school level, the high school level, and the university level, if we get that right, that will allow us to transform all the other problems we have in the world, because fundamentally all of our other problems stem from a lack of proper education. But of course, if you understand spiral dynamics, you know that education is not just one monolithic thing. Every stage of the spiral, every color has its own ideas and opinions and dogmas about what it feels is the best form of education, what education should look like. So if you ask a stage blue person, what should education look like? To them, it looks like religious indoctrination schools, the kind of stuff that you see in the Middle East, where you send your kid there and what they do is they beat him with a stick and make him memorize the Quran every day for the next 5 years until he memorizes the whole Quran, right? That's their form of education there. That's a very hardcore, deep blue stage approach to education. And I mean, we have a lot of religious education schools in America as well. So we're not immune to that, not at all. I mean, Christians and evangelicals want basically that same kind of theocratic form of education here in the US. That's stage blue. Then there's stage orange education, which is also a lot of what modern education is in America, for example. Stage orange being very kind of success-oriented. And this is the kind of education where maybe you go to a trade school and they teach you some sort of specific trade skills. And basically they train you so that you become good at business. They train you so you become good at a particular career. Maybe you become a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, a computer programmer, some sort of physicist, scientist, whatever, right? It's just this sort of like straightforward rationalist form of education. And most people think that that's like the pinnacle of education is stage orange education. But actually, this is a very, very limited form of education, which gets you chasing materialism, because basically stage orange is a materialistic paradigm. So it gets you chasing materialism, chasing money, chasing business, chasing success. But in the end, this is all hollow, and it leads to many of the other social problems that we have, environmental problems and so forth, because our education, a stage orange education, doesn't teach you about environmental factors, doesn't teach you about systems thinking, doesn't teach you about higher spiritual pursuits, doesn't teach you how to meditate, doesn't teach you about shamanism, doesn't teach you about self-actualization, all these topics that Actualize already talks about. Why wasn't it taught to you in your school? Because most people went to a stage orange school, which doesn't recognize these things, doesn't recognize the value of spirituality, because it confuses spirituality with stage blue dogma or theocracy, which of course, you need to be at a higher stage of development in order to see the difference between those two. During the Bush administration, we passed legislation in the US called No Child Left Behind. And this was a tragic legislation, because what it did is it basically made most federal schools subject to very strict standards of like classroom testing. And so there's a lot of standardized testing. Kids these days are put through a ton of testing. I remember when I finished high school in 2003, already we had way too many standardized tests. But No Child Left Behind kicked in after that. I can only imagine how terrible it is now. Mostly what our education system is now, it's sort of like a factory farming approach to educating our children. The classroom sizes are very large. We're taught the exact same curriculum to all the children. There's no customization given to different types of students. There's no recognition, for example, that certain students need one form of education while there's other students need another form of education, right? Certain students are more kinesthetic. Other students are more philosophical and abstract. Other students are more artistic and creative and artsy craftsy. Other students are more into like literature. Others are more into mathematics and computer programming. And you have to take into account, for example, that human beings have different brain types, which means that we're going to resonate with different kinds of subject matters. And right now, our education system doesn't take any of this into account. It's just a very cookie cutter system. And it is all about like passing achievement scores. So it's like, can you read? Can you do math at a certain level? It's like, it's very, very rudimentary. And mostly we're training kids how to pass tests, how to get good at answering multiple choices and guess the right answers, rather than actually educating them for like deep understanding of what reality is and what life is and how life works. And that's exactly what you would expect with a very mechanical sort of materialistic approach of Stage Orange. But this is problematic, because later in life what this leads to a very materialistic form of living where the student can't really be connected to life, can't really be passionate about things, because they weren't taught how to be passionate. They weren't taught how to find their life purpose. They weren't taught the importance of life purpose. They weren't taught the importance of meditation. They weren't taught the importance of holistic health, because Stage Orange doesn't understand these things yet. So then you get the Stage Green education, which is one step better. And here they might start teaching you a little bit more about health, a little bit more about sex and love and relationships, and a little bit more about the environment, and a little bit more about ecology and this sorts of stuff. And this is mostly what a lot of universities teach these days. And even so, there's still a big backlash right now happening from various folks against Stage Green universities, because they want them to be more Stage Orange rather than green. And this is the whole Jordan Peterson shtick that he's all about, is he thinks the universities are too green, which of course is the opposite of the problem. Yes, universities are green, but the solution is not to drag them back down to orange and blue, but to evolve them up to yellow. So what would a Stage Yellow approach to education look like? It would acknowledge for the first time that different students in different parts of the world and in different parts of the country are all at their own levels of the spiral. So maybe, for example, what would happen is you enter a university and they would give you a test. But this wouldn't be a test for you to do some multiple choice, passing some sort of government standards. This would be a test to determine where you are at the spiral. And then whether you're blue or orange or green or yellow or whatever, and then they would recommend a curriculum that's going to be right for you. Let's say you're at Stage Blue. If you're at Stage Blue and you enter university, then you go into the Stage Blue program. The Stage Blue program is not just going to feed you Stage Blue propaganda. The Stage Blue program is going to be designed in such a way that it evolves you up to orange, and then from orange to green and above. If you're a student who enters at Stage Orange, there's going to be a separate track for you, which helps to evolve you into Stage Green. And if you're a student who enters at green, there's going to be a separate track for you that evolves you to yellow. So this would be a tier 2 approach to education. This would be an understanding of the entire spiral, seeing that education needs to be different for every stage of the spiral. Different ideas need to be taught, different techniques need to be used. And if you're designing education from a Stage Yellow perspective, then you're designing it such that you're helping everybody evolve up the spiral at their own pace. You see, part of the problem with Stage Green education is that they try to push Stage Green on everybody below them. And that tends to not work and actually creates that sort of Jordan Peterson ego backlash reaction, which is what you're seeing when Stage Blue and Orange encounter Stage Green. They tend to not want to evolve up to green. That's because green isn't properly explaining the situation to them. It's not properly designed yet. Stage Yellow could be much better at doing that. Also, if we're talking about education all over the world, it's very important that when we're talking about underdeveloped countries, like in the Middle East, in Africa, in South America, and other places, that you need to take into account their level of the spiral. And a lot of those countries, there people are at stage purple or red or blue, like very, very low on the spiral. And so we need to tailor the education programs to work for those stages of the spiral. A common mistake is that educators from the US who are mostly at Stage Green will try to go to Africa and teach Stage Green ideas to maybe some kids in rural Africa who are like Stage Purple. And it's a complete disconnect. It's not going to work.